You have no idea how many nights I closed my eyes and wished life would let me see you just one more time. I kept wondering if I'd ever get the chance to thank the man who unknowingly changed my world. And now that you're finally sitting in front of me, my heart doesn't know whether to smile or cry.
My name is Owen Walsh. I'm 39 years old, and I've been a paramedic for 14 of those years. I spend my working life on the worst day of other people's lives. A man clutching his chest on a kitchen floor. A teenager wrapped around a steering wheel. A grandmother who's fallen and lain there since morning. I show up, I keep my voice calm, I do the thing that needs doing, and then I hand them off at the hospital doors and I go to the next one. 14 years of being the steady hands on a stranger's worst night, and then driving home in an 11-year-old car to an apartment where nobody's waiting up. The pay is what it is. People assume a man who saves lives must do all right. He does not. I work overtime I shouldn't to cover a rent that keeps climbing, and I drive a car I keep alive with my own hands, the way I keep strangers alive with them. And at the end of the month it's close. But that's not the part that wears on you. The part that wears on you is the going home alone. 14 years of it. That's why I was sitting in a diner on a Thursday night, in a shirt I'd ironed twice, waiting on a blind date my sister had set me up with. Beth had been after me for years. You give everything to everybody, and you keep nothing for yourself, Owen. She'd finally just done it, traded numbers with a woman from her office, set a time and a place, and told me she'd never speak to me again if I canceled. So I sat in a booth at Marlene's off Route 9, with a glass of water sweating in front of me, more nervous than I get pulling a kid out of a wreck, and I waited. Before I tell you what happened, let me say one thing straight to you. Because I've come to learn these stories, find the people who need them. If you're someone who spent your life showing up for everybody, and quietly figured you're just not the kind of person who gets chosen back, stay with me tonight. This one's for you, and if it reaches you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to Dreamheart Stories, because we make these for the people who do the carrying. Now let me tell you about the night nobody showed up. And then somebody did. She was 20 minutes late, and then she was 30, and then she was 40. I want to walk you through what that's like, in case you've been lucky enough never to know. The first 10 minutes you tell yourself it's traffic. The second 10 you check your phone and there's nothing, and you tell yourself she's parking. By half an hour you've stopped looking at the door, because looking at the door and having it not be her is its own small death. Over and over. The waitress had come by twice. The first time I said I was waiting on someone. The second time I said it quieter. By 40 minutes I knew. You know the way you know a call's gone bad before the monitor tells you. She wasn't coming. Maybe she'd looked through the window and seen a tired 39-year-old in a twice-ironed shirt and kept driving. Maybe something came up. It doesn't matter. The result is the same, and the result was a man sitting alone in a booth at Marlene's, with a glass of water, and the long, familiar feeling settling over him like a coat he'd worn his whole life. Of course she didn't come. What did you think? I reached for my wallet to leave money for the water and go home, where at least nobody could watch me not be chosen. That's when the waitress came back. Except this time, she didn't stop at the edge of the table with her pad. She set down a plate of pie I hadn't ordered, and a coffee, and then she did something that froze me with my wallet half out of my pocket. She slid into the booth, across from me, in the seat that was supposed to be somebody else's. She was about my age, maybe a little younger. Dark hair tied back, tired around the eyes the way you get tired around the eyes from a job that's all on your feet. She had her hands folded on the table, like she'd rehearsed this, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, something between nervous and certain. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this is. I've been trying to work up to it for an hour." She took a breath. "Can I tell you something?" I figured she felt sorry for me. That's where my mind went. The waitress had watched a man get stood up, and she'd come over to be kind about it, and I braced for the gentle pity, which is somehow worse than no pity at all. But that wasn't it. She looked at me a moment longer, studying my face the way you study a word you're sure you've spelled wrong, and then she said, "It's you. I've been standing at that counter for 45 minutes, telling myself it couldn't be. But it's you. You don't recognize me. There's no reason you would. But I have spent 6 years hoping I'd get the chance to say this to you. And I'm not going to waste it, because some woman didn't show up." She steadied her hands. "6 years ago, you saved my son's life. And you saved a piece of me along with him. And I never even got your name." I didn't have any idea what she was talking about. I see hundreds of faces a year. Thousands. They blur into one long, worst day of someone's life, and I've trained myself to let them go, because a man who carries every call doesn't last in this work. I told her, gently, that I thought she might have me confused with someone else. She shook her head. "No, it's you." And she started to tell me, and as she told me, it came back. Her name was Lena. 6 years ago, she'd been a single mother. Newly single, the father gone before the boy turned 3, just walked out on the both of them and never looked back. Her son was named Max, and he was 5 years old, and one ordinary evening in their apartment, Max had a seizure. Not a small one. He went rigid, and then he stopped, and then he wasn't breathing, and Lena was alone, in a third-floor walk-up, with her baby turning gray in her arms, and a phone she could barely hold steady enough to dial. And as she said it, I remembered the stairwell, narrow, a bike chained at the bottom. I remembered a young mother who'd gone past screaming into a kind of frozen silence that's far more dangerous, the silence of a person about to shut down completely. I remembered a small boy on a living room floor, and the long, terrible seconds before we got him back. "You were so calm," Lena said, and her voice had started to shake. "Everybody else who came up those stairs was moving fast and shouting, and it made it worse. It made it feel like the end of the world. But you got down on the floor and you got him breathing, and then you did something I have thought about every single day for 6 years. You looked up at me. I was standing against the wall with my hands over my mouth, useless, watching my son die, and you looked right at me and you said, 'I need your help, Mom. He needs to hear your voice.' And you gave me a job. You told me to get down next to him and breathe with him so he'd have something to follow. 'In for 4, you said. 'Hold for 4, out for 4. You made me do it with you. In for 4. And you kept me breathing while you kept him breathing, and you turned me from a woman watching her child die into a woman helping save him. Do you have any idea what that did for me? I wasn't helpless anymore. You wouldn't let me be helpless.'" I remembered the count. It's an old trick. You give a panicking person a rhythm to hold on to, partly for them and partly to keep them out of your way, and partly because a terrified parent who can't help is a wound that doesn't close even after the patient lives. I'd done it 1,000 times. I didn't remember it being the most important thing that ever happened to anyone. To me, it had been a Tuesday. "You rode with us," she said. "You didn't have to. You stayed past when your shift ended. I found that out later. I asked at the hospital. They told me your shift had ended an hour before, and you stayed anyway, until they told us Max was stable. And when I tried to thank you, you just said," she laughed, wet-eyed, "you said, 'That's the job, ma'am. You did great.' And you were gone before I could even ask your name. 6 years. 6 years I've wanted to find the man who saved my son and told a falling-apart mother she wasn't useless. And you walk into my diner and sit in my section and get stood up by some stranger who has no idea who she didn't bother to show up for. I don't have good words for what that did to me, sitting in that booth. You have to understand what a man in my position carries that nobody sees. You do this work for 14 years, and the ones you lose stay with you, and the ones you save disappear. They walk out of the hospital and back into their lives, and you never know what became of them. You start to wonder if any of it lands, if the calm voice and the staying late and the small human things you do that no protocol requires actually matter to anyone, or if you're just a pair of hands that shows up and leaves. You go home alone enough nights and you start to think maybe a man is only worth what he is to the people who keep him, and you don't have any of those, so maybe the math comes out to not much. And here was a woman across a diner table telling me that one of those vanished Tuesdays had been the hinge her entire life turned on. That a boy was 11 years old now because of a night I'd half forgotten. That a forgotten count, in for 4, had been carried in a stranger's chest for 6 years, like something sacred. I'd spent the whole night believing I wasn't the kind of man anyone chose to sit across from. And the truth, it turned out, was that I'd been chosen 6 years ago, in a stairwell, in the worst moment of 2 people's lives, and just never been told. "How is he?" I finally managed. "Max." Lena's whole face changed. "He's 11, she said. "He's a holy terror. He plays goalie, and he reads about sharks, and he eats me out of house and home, and he has not had a seizure in 4 years. She pulled out her phone with hands still not quite steady and showed me a photo of a gap-toothed kid in a goalie jersey, grinning, alive, ordinary, miraculous. And every birthday, she said, every single year, on his birthday, we say a thank you to the man whose name we never got. She looked at me. I get to put a name to it now. We talked until the diner closed. Marlene's empties out by 10 on a Thursday, and the cook left, and the other waitress left, and Lena flipped the sign, and we kept talking, in a diner gone quiet, the way you can only really talk when the world stops watching. She told me about the 6 years, raising Max alone, 2 jobs, the constant low terror that the seizures would come back, the slow exhale as the years stacked up and they didn't. I told her things I don't tell people, about the going home alone, about being the one who carries and never gets carried, about sitting in that booth at 40 minutes knowing she wasn't coming, and thinking, of course, the way I'd thought, of course, about 100 things in my life. She got quiet at that. Then she said, "The woman who stood you up tonight did me the biggest favor anyone's done me in 6 years." And I didn't know what to say to that, so I looked down at my cold pie, which is what I do when something gets too close. When she finally let me out the locked door near midnight, I stood in the parking lot next to my 11-year-old car, under a buzzing light, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could name. Like a man who'd just found out his life had meant something to somebody, somewhere, the whole time he'd been sure it hadn't. And then I got in my car and drove home, and proceeded to nearly ruin the whole thing. Here's the part I'm least proud of, and the part I think a lot of you will know in your own bones. I didn't go back. The warmth lasted about as long as the drive home. By the time I was up my own dark stairs and into my own quiet apartment, the old voice had found me again, and the old voice is patient, and it always knows exactly what to say. That was about Max, it told me. That was a grateful mother thanking the man who saved her son. Don't you dare turn it into something it wasn't. She was being kind. You go back in there making eyes at her, you'll humiliate yourself and you'll ruin the one good thing, the one time you got to find out you mattered. Leave it clean. Be the hero who walks back out the door before he becomes the sad EMT who read too much into a free slice of pie. You're the man who carries, Owen. You're not the man who gets to stay. It's a convincing voice. It's been right, or seemed right, my whole life, so I did what it said. I didn't go back to Marlene's. I worked my shifts, and I drove past the Route 9 exit on my way to calls, and I didn't take it. A week went by. I told myself it was the noble thing, the clean thing. Really, I was just doing what I'd always done, getting out the door before anyone could decide they didn't want me to stay. I'd rather walk away from a good thing than stand still long enough to be turned down. A week and a half after that night, I was at the station between calls, when one of the other medics told me there was somebody out front asking for me. By name, Owen Walsh. It was Lena, and she wasn't alone. Standing next to her, in a goalie jersey, with a gap in his teeth and his mother's tired eyes, was an 11-year-old boy looking up at me like I was something out of a story he'd been told his whole life, which, I suppose, I was. "You're the guy," Max said. It wasn't a question. He said it the way kids say the true thing adults dance around. "You're the guy who saved me when I was little. Mom's been looking for you forever." I got down on one knee, the way I had 6 years before, except this boy was breathing fine on his own now, breathing fine because of a Tuesday I'd nearly let myself believe didn't count. "I'm the guy," I said. My voice didn't work right. "You got big." "I'm a goalie," he informed me. "I don't let anything past me." And then this 11-year-old, who had clearly thought about this moment, stuck out his hand to shake mine, very serious, very grown-up, and said, "Thank you for not letting me die." I have held people while they passed. I have told parents the worst news a person can hear. I did not come apart at any of it, the way I came apart kneeling on the concrete in front of that fire station with a goalie's hand in mine. I couldn't get a word out. I knelt there trying to breathe and not managing it. A paramedic who couldn't run his own air, and Lena crouched down next to me, and she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said it. "In for 4, Owen. Come on. In for 4. Hold. Out for 4. She gave me my own count back. The thing I'd handed her in the worst moment of her life, 6 years carried in her chest, she handed back to me in the worst moment of my pride, when I was choking on everything I'd never let myself want. In for 4. I breathed with her the way she'd once breathed with her son. And when I could talk again, she said, quiet, just for me, "You didn't come back." She wasn't angry. "I waited a week, and you didn't come back. And I figured you'd talked yourself into some reason why you shouldn't. You strike me as a man who's real good at talking himself out of things he wants." She looked at me. "So Max and I came to you, because I spent 6 years looking for the man who told a falling-apart woman she wasn't helpless. And now that I've found him, I'm not going to let him be too scared to find out I'd like him to stay. You don't get to save everybody and then run off before anybody saves you back. Not this time." I'd love to tell you I had a smooth answer. I didn't. I knelt on the concrete in front of my coworkers and a grinning goalie, and the first woman in years to look at me and want me to stay, and I just nodded like an idiot, and Max said, "Is he gonna cry again?" And that broke it, and we all laughed, and that was the beginning. We took it slow, because slow is the only honest speed for two people who've each spent years learning not to count on anyone. Dinners at Marlene's after closing, the 3 of us. Max's games, where I stood in the cold and yelled myself hoarse for a kid in goal. I learned how a boy that age tests you, pushes to see if you'll leave like the last man did. And I learned the thing I most needed to learn, which is that I am very good at not leaving. It's the one thing I've always been good at. Show up, stay calm, don't leave. It turns out that's most of what a family is. There were hard parts. The hardest was me, same as always. The first time things felt too good, I did my old trick and started backing toward the door, found a reason to be busy, went quiet. And Lena, who knew that move now, didn't chase me and didn't let me run either. She just texted me 2 words, "In for 4." And I sat in my 11-year-old car and breathed, and then I drove to the diner instead of away from it, and I told her I was scared, out loud, like a man, that I'd never been the one who got chosen, and I didn't know how to trust it. And she said, "You've been choosing other people your whole life, Owen. Let somebody choose you for once. Stand still long enough to let it happen." So I did. I stood still. It's been 5 years. Max is 16 now, and he still doesn't let anything past him, and he calls me a name I won't repeat here, because he says Dad is for greeting cards, but he started using it about 3 years ago, and I had to pull the car over the first time he did. Lena and I got married at the diner. After hours. Where else? With Marlene herself doing the cooking. And a goalie standing up as my best man in a jacket he'd already outgrown. I still run the ambulance. Somebody has to. But I come home now. That's the whole difference. And it's everything. 14 years I drove home alone. Now there's a light on, and a kid who needs help with chemistry, and a woman who saved my life as surely as I once saved her son's. Just slower, over a longer night. I keep a count in my chest now, too. In for 4. We use it in our house for everything. For Max's nerves before a big game. For Lena's long shifts. For the ordinary panics of an ordinary good life. It's family shorthand now. The thing I gave a stranger in a stairwell came back to me and became the rhythm of a home. People ask me sometimes what I think I did to deserve it. The wife, the boy, the light left on after 14 dark years. And I tell them the truth, which is that I didn't do anything to deserve it. Not on purpose. I just did my job, one Tuesday, 6 years before I knew it mattered, the same as I'd done 1,000 other Tuesdays, with no idea that one of them was quietly saving the rest of my life. I didn't earn Lena and Max. I just, by some grace, got told what one of my forgotten kindnesses had been worth, and then, and this is the only part I can take any credit for, when she came to find me, I finally stood still long enough to let it land, because here's what 14 years of being the man who carries taught me wrong, and what one stood-up blind date taught me right. We go through our lives so sure that we don't matter, that the good we do disappears the second it leaves our hands, that we're just the steady background of other people's stories and never the ones who get chosen, and the whole time, we have no idea which Tuesday saved somebody. No idea who's been carrying a thing we said in a stairwell for 6 years like it was holy. No idea that the kindness we let go of without a second thought landed somewhere and grew. You are not invisible. You just can't see, from where you're standing, what you've already meant to people who never got the chance to tell you. So if you're out there tonight, sure you're only ever the one who shows up for everybody, and never the one anybody shows up for, sitting alone at your own version of a diner booth at 40 minutes, thinking, of course, I want a man who believed exactly that, to tell you that you might be wrong. I was. You don't know which of your forgotten Tuesdays is out there waiting to walk back into your life and sit down across from you. You just have to be brave enough, when it finally does, to stop running for the door, to stand still, to let somebody choose you back. Because no matter how many nights you've gone home alone, no matter how long you've been the one who carries, you have already mattered more than you know. A waitress sat down across from me and told me so. I just had to stay in the booth long enough to hear it.